Lesson 100, Paul and Agrippa. You should have your Bible. Turn there to Acts chapter 25. Okay. We talked yesterday, we left at the end. Paul was taken to Caesarea. He had been examined by Felix. He was kept in Herod's judgment hall. We saw how Felix and his wife kind of met with him. Then we saw Festus, and how he spent time with Paul. And finally Festus kind of put it to him, well, I've got no accusers here. Maybe if we went back to Jerusalem we could find some accusers. Paul says, absolutely not. I will not go to Jerusalem. I appeal to Caesar. With that, he's saying, I will go to Rome and Caesar will judge me. But there's a little bit that goes on here. Okay? So let's pick it up here in chapter 25 of Acts. Okay? Verse 21. But when Paul had appealed to be reserved unto the hearing of Augustus, Caesar Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I might send him to Caesar. Okay. Then Agrippa, so King Herod Agrippa, he is the great-grandson of the Herod that was alive when Jesus was born. That Herod who killed all the babies, and then his father, who was another wicked Herod, who would have been alive there during the time of Christ. And now we have this next, Herod Agrippa. Then Agrippa said unto Festus, I would also hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, thou shalt hear him. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice, that would be his sister, she also came with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing, and with the chief captains and principal men of the city, at Festus's commandment, Paul was brought forth. So great pomp. I ask you there, what about that great pomp there? Again, he comes in dressed in all his finery. Make sure there's nice trumpets being played, and a royal throne that's probably been well dusted off before he gets there. He's a man who is concerned about outward appearances, very much like the Pharisee trying to impress people. But as Paul accused the other people, Ananias, of being a whited wall, it's very similar to King Herod Agrippa. King Herod Agrippa is a wicked man, a heinous man. His filth he tries to cover up with his outward beauty or what he does. We can look at the world around us too. And you might say, well, they cover themselves up with clothing to make themselves look beautiful on the outside. But that's not it. We can go a bit deeper. Men and women want to appear that they're doing good. They give away millions of dollars to other foundations and ways to help the poor and what they can do, all thinking they're doing this as kind of putting on an outward raiment, when underneath they don't love the Lord. They fail to love God and to glorify Him and honor Him. So in that way too, it's like putting on this pomp, whether it be just by outward appearances, putting on nice clothes and having trumpets play and going to sit on your throne, or whether it be making yourself look good before men by giving away money and doing all those things and helping the poor and doing all those things. That's just pomp. Those are things that we should do, taking care of the poor and helping them. But if we're doing it not with the love of God in our hearts, but with the love of ourselves, then it's no more than pomp. So anyways, in comes Agrippa and his sister Bernice with great pomp, and Festus calls for Paul. Verse 24, and Festus said, King Agrippa, and all men which are here present with us, ye see this man, about whom all the multitude of the Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. No, Festus says before Agrippa, look, all these Jews are saying this man should be dead. Put him to death. Verse 25, but when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I have determined to send him, of whom I have no certain thing to write unto my Lord. Wherefore I have brought him forth before you, and specially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination had, I might have somewhat to write. For it seemeth to me unreasonable to send a prisoner, and not withal to signify the crimes laid against him. So who does Festus need to send a letter to? Garrett? If a man comes before Caesar, there better be a written piece of paper that explains the crimes which this man has done that deserves him to be put to death, or else he's just going to dismiss the charges. Okay? But there's a problem. What's Festus's problem? Jesse? Yeah, I've got some somewhat of a crime here that the Jews are complaining about, but this isn't a crime that deserves death. I got nothing to write, Agrippa. Now, King Herod Agrippa is king of the Jews. He's knowledgeable in Jewish customs and laws and understands them. So what Festus is hoping here is that King Herod can give him some insight into what's going on here. Okay? What's happening? Do you know these Jewish customs and laws? Does this man deserve to be put to death based on what you know about the Jewish laws and customs, O King Herod Agrippa? Okay? So that's what Festus is trying to do here. He's trying to find that out. Okay? Chapter 26. So let's see what happens now that Paul is before Agrippa and they begin to have a conversation with one another. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, Thou art permitted to speak for thyself. You didn't speak until the king told you to speak. So now Paul speaks. Then Paul stretched forth the hand and answered for himself, I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because I shall answer for myself this day before thee, touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews, especially because I know thee to be expert in all customs and questions which are among the Jews. Wherefore I beseech thee to hear me patiently. So it's going to take some time here, but be patient, King Herod Agrippa. I'll explain it. I'm glad that you are an expert. You will see what these Jews are saying is not true. My manner of life from my youth, which was at the first among mine own nation at Jerusalem, knew all the Jews, which knew me from the beginning, if they would testify, that after the most straightest sect of our religion, I lived a Pharisee. So he sets that forth. I was a Pharisee. And now I stand and am judged for the hope of the promise made of God unto our fathers. I am being judged based on this hope that the Jewish fathers had of a Messiah, unto which promise our 12 tribes, instantly serving God day and night, hope to come. So they were hoping for Christ. For which hope's sake, King Agrippa, I am accused of the Jews. That hope was Jesus, and that's what I'm accused about. Why should it be thought a thing incredible with you that God should raise the dead? I verily thought with myself that I ought to do many things contrary to the name of Jesus of Nazareth, which thing I also did in Jerusalem, and many of the saints did I shut up in prison, having received authority from the chief priests. And then when they were put to death, I gave my voice against them. So he lays forth all of his sins, how he had been a Pharisee, how he had, when he was a Jew and Pharisee, how he had a hope for Jesus to come, just as the Jews do. He knew all about the Messiah. Now, he gets into the next part, which is his conversion. So we see there his conversion. He talks here in 14, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And everything that Jesus said to Paul there is recounted. And then he talks about his work in Damascus. Okay, verse 20. Okay. Let's go to verse 21, because here we get back to the accusations. For these causes the Jews caught me in the temple and went about to kill me. Having therefore obtained help of God, I continue until this day, witnessing both to small and great, saying none other things than those which the prophets and Moses say should come. So I didn't say anything different than what they prophesied about. That Christ should suffer, and that he should be the first, and should rise from the dead, and should show light unto the people and to the Gentiles. Remember, that's why we looked as Jesus was preaching that he always referenced back to an Isaiah or somewhere else where it told that the law, the preaching, would go to the Gentiles as well. Okay? So I'm not doing anything strange here, King Agrippa. Verse 24, and he thus spoke for himself. And as he thus spoke for himself, so Festus interrupts him here. Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, thou art beside thyself. Much learning doth make thee mad. For he said, I am not. So he accused him of being crazy. You know so much. You've learned so much. You've looked into it too much. You've overread it. And now you're crazy. Paul's response, and he said, I am not mad, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness. For the king knoweth of these things, before whom also I speak freely, for I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him. For this thing was not done in a corner. In other words, this didn't happen in some little corner that nobody knew about. This was wide open, King Herod Agrippa, right in the middle of the city. Everybody knew what was going on. This was not something that you can ignore and say, I didn't know about. Of course you knew about it. Okay? King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? I know that thou believest. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. Almost, Paul. You almost convinced me to become a Christian. There's no way that he would, because God is not working in his heart here. And Paul said, I would to God. He said, I wish. That would be the best thing that you could do, King Agrippa. And that not only thou, but also all that hear me this day. So everybody in this room should become a Christian. We're both almost and altogether such am I as I am, except these bonds. And when he had thus spoken, the king rose up, and the governor, and Bernice, and they sat with them. And when they were gone aside, so Agrippa and Festus go off to the side, they talked between themselves, saying, this man doeth nothing worthy of death or of bonds. Then said Agrippa unto Festus, this man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed to Caesar. If this man hadn't appealed to Caesar, King Agrippa says, I might have convinced you to let him go. You're right. There's nothing worthy of death that this man has been accused of. Oh, the Jews don't like him for this or that. And maybe they could put him in prison for a week or tell him to stop. But there's nothing worthy of death here. But because he's appealed to Caesar he must go. Now, if we look at the beginning, chapter 27, we don't know what was in the letter. What did Festus accuse Paul of? Maybe trying to overthrow the government. Calling him Jesus a king. Hey, upsetting the Jews. We don't know exactly what they wrote. But we'll pick up tomorrow then. Our next lesson. What happens to Paul after that. So Festus can find nothing wrong with him. King Herod Agrippa can't either. But he must go to Caesar. So they must ship him off. And we'll see what happens along what's called Paul's fourth missionary journey. Because along the way he is able to witness to many. God provides opportunity for Paul to witness. So it's his travels to Rome by ship, but it's also a missionary journey in that God is allowing Paul to preach and teach.